I would like to describe a fundamental problem and a solution, and then in the last minute or two of my talk, I'm going to describe how we are going to implement the solution here in Chile. We made an announcement, had a short press conference this morning, which you probably don't know about. First, I have to describe the problem. Democracy is supposed to have something to do with the will of the people and connecting the will of the people with what's actually done. But everyone's trying to manipulate the will of the people, to distort public opinion, to sell policies and programs by telling the people the good things about them, but not the other side. And people are in their filter bubbles. In social media, they talk to people very much like themselves. So in a way, the political incentives that operate in our democracy, and your democracy, and all democracies around the world, are political incentives that strangle the will of the people because they strangle the process of formulating it for most people. And I'll explain the solution to this, or the solution that I have come to, which has worked in many countries around the world and may be of use here. Let's just think about consulting the people. The two questions you need to ask for any process that is going to consult the people and try to think about what the will of the people is on that issue, the two questions are, who is consulted? How are they found, or how do they volunteer themselves? And what kind of opinion is solicited? Is it an opinion where people have actually taken the time to think about the issues and become informed? I bargained for an extra 1 minute on my 15 minutes in order to show you an example of what not to do. Isn't that a beautiful bridge? Don't you think that's a beautiful bridge? So that's the bridge in Hungary that connects the two parts of the capital, Buda and Pest. And the Hungarian government built this bridge, and the government decided they were going to consult the people about who to name it after. And an American comedian named Stephen Colbert, whom you may have heard of, saw that picture and said, "That's a beautiful bridge. I would like to have that bridge named after me." And so he went on television and he led a campaign for people to vote to make that the Stephen Colbert Bridge. And he got, I think, about 12 million votes on the internet. Last I checked, there were only 7 million people in Hungary. So there's clearly something a little bit off. So the Hungarian government said, "Oh, we didn't spend all this money to have it named after an American comedian. We're going to change the rules. It has to be named after someone who can speak Hungarian." So he went on TV and he showed off his new Hungarian lessons. So then the Hungarian government changed it again, and they said, it has to be named after somebody who is dead. So he withdrew. But it shows that self-selected voting can be very unrepresentative. So that's part of the problem for my two problems were who is consulted, and the second is what kind of opinion do they have. I'm going to get to that now. So there are three problems with public opinion as we normally find it. The first has come to be called rational ignorance. If I have one vote in millions, why should I spend a lot of time and effort becoming informed about the details of public policy proposals? My individual vote or my individual opinion will not make any measurable difference. Would that it were otherwise. We would like to have informed citizens, but there's no rational incentive for people normally to become very informed. So citizens tend not to be informed, and this is shown in studies around the world. The second, I call phantom opinions, but what it means is that many of the opinions you see in public opinion polls don't exist. That is, people never like to say they don't know. So if they were asked about something complicated, they will almost at random pick an alternative. This was illustrated by my late friend, George Bishop, at the University of Cincinnati, who asked the public about the Public Affairs Act of 1975 in the US. People offered answers about whether they supported or opposed the Public Affairs Act of 1975. But there was no Public Affairs Act of 1975. It was fictional. So it was just noise that they were getting. 20 years later, the Washington Post celebrated the 20th anniversary of the non-existent Public Affairs Act of 1975 by asking the public, by splitting the sample and asking the public whether they wanted to repeal it, that is, get rid of it. Half the sample they said the Republicans wanted to repeal it. Half the sample they said the Democrats wanted to repeal it. They got completely different answers, but of course it didn't exist. So that's the second problem. The third problem is that if you do consult, if you do talk to other people about politics or policy, even the very important issues facing the country, you're likely to talk to people like yourself. From similar social locations, those are your friends, those are your family, et cetera, et cetera. You will not hear the other side. And if you go on social media, you will share with other people who are like-minded. You will not hear the other side. And you may consult media online or listen to news that you're likely to approve of, and you will not hear the other side. Now, I'm interested in something called deliberation, where people hear the other side. And they don't just hear the other side, but they discuss with other people who have different points of view on the basis of the best conditions that we can provide. And so we take a random sample and we give it a survey, but then we bring it together on the basis of in-person discussion, say a sample of 400 or 500 with balanced materials that have been carefully vetted, with arguments on either side, where all the experts who have views about it have managed to identify the key arguments, made simple and clear, and we engage in small group deliberation with trained moderators who are trained not to offer any hint of their own opinion, and questions to competing experts, not one expert, but competing experts who are advocates of the different points of view. And then at the end of that process, people take the same questionnaire that they took when they were first contacted at home, and we make it a representative sample of the whole country. We put the whole country in one room under conditions where it can think. So the idea is, what would the people think under good conditions? We have done this in 29 countries, 110 cases around the world. You can see every inhabited continent, even in sub-Saharan Africa. The European Union, twice. The whole European, we put the whole European Union, put the whole sample in the European Union Parliament building. That was the first one we ever did. I won't show. That was in Britain. We did, 1994, the issue of crime. A woman came up to me whose husband was in that sample. We allowed the 300 in this Manchester television studio. She said she wanted to thank me because in 30 years of marriage, her husband had never read a newspaper. But from the moment he was invited to this, he started to read every newspaper every day, and he was going to be much more interesting to live with in retirement. Now, for me, that showed that we overcame the incentives for rational ignorance. He was going to be part of a group that was on television, that was actually in dialogue with the key politicians and experts, et cetera. His voice mattered. And the thing that I've learned in these 109 projects around the world is that, contrary to what my colleagues in political science say, the public is not stupid. The public is actually very smart if they have a reason to pay attention, if they think their voice matters, if they're willing to think through the issues together, and if you make it possible for them to get the best of the competing arguments on either side and to get their questions answered. We've done this in China. I'm going to slip. That's the European Union. The first one, we did this twice because it works so well. With translation, for the 22 languages? Well, 21. The Irish all said they would speak English, but we were prepared for 22 languages. Now, I thought I invented this, but this is the machine in ancient Athens, or what's left of it. It's only half of it. The ancient Athenians had a random sampling machine to select people for the Council of 500 who would set the agenda for the assembly. It's called the Clarotarian. And so this was lost in the dust of history. When the American founders tried to invent a republic for the large-scale modern democracy, they didn't know about this because Aristotle's Constitution of Athens was discovered only 100 years later. But this is the random sampling machine. Now we do random sampling with public opinion polling. We took this back to Greece. That's George Papandreou, who was prime minister, and used it to select candidates. In Japan, this was a very interesting case. In Japan, we did it on the pension system. And there on the pension system, the government was just about to privatize the pensions, citing the Chilean model as an example, because Japan's getting very old. And so about 70% of the public wanted to privatize in polls. The government was about to go ahead. My Japanese collaborators, we had done 7 deliberative polls in Japan, got a grant, and they had the support of Asahi Shimbun, which is the New York Times of Japan, and NHK, that's the television network. And we did a national deliberative poll, and when the people in Japan finally understood the way the system would work, support dropped to 35% from 69% in that case. And support increased for an increase in taxes. And you know how hard it is to get the people to support an increase in taxes, but it was an increase in the consumption tax. That's what the government did. Now, that doesn't mean that's what should be done here or not. Every country is different experiences, but that's an example of the process having important effects. They also went back to this, the Japanese government, after the Fukushima disaster. We did that. The South Koreans used it to decide whether or not to build 2 nuclear reactors. And even though President Moon is anti-nuclear, he said he would follow the result. And the result was build them because of climate change and prices and et cetera, et cetera. Northern Ireland, you see the increase in mutual respect between Protestants and Catholics, whether they're open to reason. It's very dramatic. Bulgaria, we did a project on the condition of the Roma. The Roma, the gypsies, they were in separate schools, not even in the Bulgarian language, without teachers. The older children were supposed to teach the younger children. And there's a lot of antipathy to the Roma. And we did this project, and everybody was amazed that support for closing the Roma-only schools, the segregated schools, and busing the children into the same schools with everybody else went from 42 to 66%. The New York Times wrote an article about this. The prime minister endorsed the idea. The Roma schools are now desegregated. It made Texas the leading state in wind power when it was the last state, number 50. Now it's number 1 in the United States. That's Mongolia, where this process is required by law. And that's a sample, an almost perfect sample of the people of Mongolia. That's Genghis Khan in the back. See the statue? And that's the people of Mongolia recruited with a meticulous sample from all over the country with the cooperation of the Census Bureau, identifying the people and the things they would support and would not support in a constitutional amendment, which just passed a few weeks ago. This is what we did in the United States recently. And the New York Times took a picture of every participant, the 536. We did 5 major issues facing the country, and we got very dramatic changes of opinion. Support among the Republicans for sending all the undocumented immigrants back to their home countries fell from 79% to 40%. That's a 39-point drop. They opened up and talked to the other side. On the Democratic side, support for some big redistributive proposals like giving a bond to every child to pay for his education, which theory sounds like a good idea, but it's very expensive. One of the presidential candidates was advocating that. Well, that went from 62% to 21%. That is, Democrats moderated, Republicans moderated after they heard the other side. Now, one of the things I want to say is today we had an announcement with many of the senators, many of the members of the Chilean Senate, all of the ones who were involved in the Futures Congress, endorsing and subscribing to a plan to do a national deliberative poll here in Chile within the next few months. And there will be a carefully worked out agenda. The agenda has been set by the referendum of the municipalities, which was held a little while ago, identifying the top concerns of the public. And the two top concerns from that will be the basis for the national deliberative poll in the next few months. I'm not going to announce a date because I'm just an advisor to the Chile. Oh, and the University of Chile will be directly involved in terms of the sampling and everything else. So you have support from some of the key politicians. You have the support from the media, and you have the social science expertise of your great university. Those are the three essential ingredients for a successful project. We will bring, and as I say, when I say we, I'm offering my help and advice for free. I don't need a job. But we're doing this. We're doing this to. Thank you. So we're doing this as a contribution to the public dialogue and to the democratic process in Chile. But if this works the way it has worked in 29 countries around the world, it will provide a very useful input about what the people really would support and what they would not support when they really think about it. So I will be back to Chile and hope to see some of you again, and I thank you for your time and attention.